My name is Commander Zelthar, and I have been observing new cadets at the Galactic Military Academy for over 30 cycles. In all that time, I thought I had seen every possible variation of sentient life the galaxy had to offer. I was wrong. Dead wrong. The orientation hall buzzed with nervous chatter as representatives from 47 different species gathered for their first day. The Valorians, with their crystalline blue skin, spoke in melodic tones about their peaceful ocean world where the biggest threat was a particularly aggressive sea cucumber. The Nethakari delegation huddled together, their 6 arms gesturing wildly as they described their desert homeworld where temperatures occasionally reached a scorching 28 degrees Celsius. Heaven forbid. Class 9 threat level, one of them was saying, their voice trembling with what I assumed was pride. Sandstorms that last for whole minutes at a time. I was reviewing my datapad, checking the classification levels of each homeworld, when the hall doors burst open with a sound like thunder. Every head turned as a figure stumbled through the entrance, dripping wet and leaving puddles on our pristine academy floors. Sorry. The newcomer called out, shaking water from his dark hair like some kind of primitive mammal. The shuttle dropped me off in the middle of a rainstorm, and I had to run about half a mile to get here. The hall fell silent. This had to be the human. I consulted my datapad again, just to be sure. Species human? Homeworld Earth. Classification, Class 12 Deathworld. The highest threat rating in our database. A ripple of barely contained laughter spread through the assembled cadets. The Valorians' melodic voices turned into what could only be described as snickering. Even the usually stoic Krillian delegation seemed amused, their tentacles twitching in what passed for mirth among their species. Class 12? Whispered a Nethakari cadet. Loud enough for everyone to hear. Look at him. He is soaked from a little water. Deathworld. Another alien muttered, the word dripping with sarcasm, more like damp world. The human, Jake Martinez, according to my records, simply stood there wringing out his sleeve with the kind of casual indifference that suggested he had not heard the comments. Or worse, that he had heard them and simply did not care. Rain, huh? He said, addressing no one in particular while pulling what appeared to be a small rectangular device from his pocket. He shook it a few times, and it lit up. Back home in Seattle, we call this Tuesday. I felt my secondary heart skip a beat. Something about the way he said it, so matter-of-fact, so completely unbothered by what the other species considered mockery, made me wonder if perhaps our classification system had made its first error in over 1,000 years. Then again, how dangerous could a world really be if its inhabitants casually strolled through rainstorms? 3 days later, I got my answer. The survival training simulation had been designed by our best environmental engineers to test the limits of cadet endurance. The Arctic chamber was set to what we considered absolutely brutal conditions, -20 degrees Celsius, the kind of temperature that could kill most species within minutes of exposure. I watched from the observation deck as 46 cadets shuffled into the chamber, each wrapped in the most advanced thermal protection our technology could provide. The Valorians looked like walking igloos, their environmental suits so thick they could barely move. The Nethakari had requested additional heating units, and even then, their 6 arms were trembling like leaves in a windstorm. "Attention cadets," announced Training Sergeant Vortak over the intercom, his voice crackling with authority. "You have 60 standard minutes to complete the obstacle course. A failure to finish within the time limit results in immediate dismissal from the program. Medical teams are standing by. 60 minutes. In -20-degree weather." It was considered the most challenging environmental test in the Academy's history. Most species would be pushing their biological limits just to survive, let alone navigate a complex obstacle course. The airlock hissed open, and the cadets began filing in. That is when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Jake Martinez strolled into the chamber wearing nothing but a standard-issue jacket, not the advanced thermal gear, not even the basic environmental suit, just a thin fabric jacket that looked like something you might wear on a mildly cool day. "Martinez," Sergeant Vorthak's voice boomed. "Where is your environmental protection gear?" Jake looked down at himself, then back up at the observation window with what could only be described as confusion. "This is my environmental protection gear, sir. It is a jacket." The sergeant's three eyes bulged. "Cadet, the temperature in that chamber is -20 degrees Celsius." "Oh," Jake said, his breath forming small puffs in the frigid air. He paused for a moment, then shrugged. "That is pretty mild, actually. My hometown in Fairbanks hits -40 on a regular basis, sometimes -50 during the really fun winters." The observation deck fell silent. Even the medical team stopped their preparations to stare. "Fun winters," whispered Dr. Zelthar, our chief medical officer. Her tentacles were practically vibrating with disbelief. Jake seemed to notice the attention he was getting and scratched the back of his head sheepishly. "Yeah, you know how it is. The weather gets cold, the ground freezes solid, sometimes the spit freezes before it hits the ground. Good times." He paused, then brightened. "Oh, and the ice volcanoes. Those are pretty spectacular when they go off." If the observation deck had been silent before, it was absolutely dead now. "I am pretty sure half the staff forgot how to breathe." "Ice volcanoes?" Sergeant Vorthak's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. "Yeah, you guys have those too, right?" Jake looked around at the other cadets, who were all staring at him like he had just claimed to wrestle black holes for entertainment. "They shoot up columns of ice and steam hundreds of feet into the air. Great for ice fishing afterwards, though the fish are usually pretty stunned." Training Sergeant Vorthak's voice cracked. "What exactly is the temperature range on your homeworld, Cadet Martinez?" Jake thought for a moment, counting on his fingers. "Well, let's see. It can get as cold as -65 Celsius in some places and as hot as 55 Celsius in others. Sometimes in the same day, depending on where you are. The desert regions can hit 60 Celsius, but that is only during summer. Oh, and then there are the hurricanes. Tornadoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions. You know, typical weather stuff." I watched as every single alien in that chamber suddenly realized why Earth had been classified as a Class 12 Deathworld, and why humans had been considered for military service in the first place. If the environmental training had been enlightening, the combat session a week later was absolutely terrifying. Instructor Kretha stood before the assembled cadets in the main training gymnasium, her four muscular arms crossed in what passed for authority among her species. The Gorvani were considered the physically strongest race in the known galaxy, capable of lifting nearly 3 times their body weight. Kretha herself held 17 Academy records for combat excellence. "Today we begin physical combat training," she announced, her voice echoing off the padded walls. "But first, safety protocols. Each cadet will be equipped with full body armor, impact dampeners, and neural shock suppressors. The training dummies have been calibrated to provide resistance without causing permanent injury." She gestured toward a row of mechanical training units, each one built from reinforced titanium steel alloy and programmed to simulate combat scenarios. These were serious pieces of equipment, designed to withstand the combined assault of multiple trained Gorvani warriors. "These units are rated for Class 7 impact resistance," Kretha continued, patting one of the dummies affectionately. "It would take a direct hit from a plasma cannon to even dent them. They are, for all practical purposes, indestructible." The cadets nodded nervously, already reaching for their protective gear. Everyone except Jake, who was examining one of the training dummies with the kind of casual interest someone might show when looking at a particularly interesting rock. "Cadet Martinez," Kretha called out, "your protective equipment is over there." Jake looked up from the dummy, then glanced at the pile of armor that looked like it weighed more than he did. "Oh, thanks. But I think I am good. This looks pretty similar to the heavy bag at my old gym back home." Kretha's 4 eyes narrowed. "This is not a gym, Cadet. This is military combat training. The safety protocols exist for a reason." Sure, Jake said, rolling his shoulders like he was warming up for a light workout. "Mind if I give it a try first, just to get a feel for it?" Before Cretha could object, Jake stepped up to the nearest training dummy and threw what appeared to be a casual punch. Not a full-power military strike. Not a trained combat technique. Just a regular, everyday punch that humans probably threw at each other for fun. The sound that followed was unlike anything I had ever heard in my 40 years of military service. It was the sound of metal screaming. The indestructible training dummy, rated for Class 7 impact resistance, crumpled like tissue paper. The reinforced titanium steel torso caved in completely, sparks flying from destroyed internal mechanisms. The unit toppled backward, taking out 2 more dummies in a domino effect of mechanical destruction. The gymnasium fell silent, except for the sound of settling metal and the occasional spark. Jake stared at the wreckage, then looked at his fist with genuine confusion. Ha! That was weird. Usually takes at least 3 or 4 hits to break the heavy bag. Instructor Cretha's voice came out as barely a whisper. Medical. Emergency. Now. 20 minutes later, Jake was strapped to a medical examination table while Dr. Villana ran every scan our medical bay possessed. The results, when they came back, defied everything we thought we knew about biological limitations. Bone density is 4 times the galactic average, Dr. Villana reported, her voice shaking as she read from her datapad. Muscle fiber efficiency is off the charts. His skeletal structure could theoretically withstand impacts that would liquefy most known species. That makes sense, Jake said conversationally from the examination table. I played football in high school. American football, not the kind where you kick the ball around. The kind where you run into each other at full speed for 3 hours. Dr. Villana dropped her datapad. You did what for entertainment? Oh yeah, great fun. Rugby too. And hockey. Oh, and boxing. That was my favorite. Nothing like getting punched in the face repeatedly to build character. I watched as every medical professional in the room slowly backed away from the examination table. Your species engages in combat sports for recreation? Dr. Villana managed to ask. Jake brightened. Absolutely. Mixed martial arts, wrestling, kickboxing, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Some people collect stamps. I collected concussions. That was the moment we all realized we were not dealing with a cadet. We were dealing with a walking, talking weapon who thought getting beaten unconscious was a weekend hobby. The obstacle course incident happened during week 3, and it nearly gave me a complete nervous breakdown. The Academy's standard obstacle course was designed to test agility, endurance, and problem-solving under pressure. Nothing too dangerous, just a series of walls to climb, ropes to swing from, and barriers to navigate. The kind of thing that might challenge a cadet without risking serious injury. Jake was halfway through the course, moving with the kind of fluid efficiency that made the rest of us look like we were moving through thick mud when disaster struck. A poorly maintained section of the climbing wall gave way, and a jagged piece of metal caught his forearm as he fell. The sound of tearing flesh echoed across the training grounds. Medical emergency, screamed Cadet Thula, her voice reaching frequencies that made my ears hurt. Code blue. Code blue. Every alien in the vicinity immediately went into panic mode. The Valorians started their traditional death wails. The Nethakari began frantically signaling for emergency evacuation. Even the usually calm Krillians were extending their tentacles in distress patterns. I activated the emergency beacon and began coordinating the medical response team. In my experience, any injury that caused that much blood loss would require immediate surgical intervention and at least 3 days of intensive care. That is when I heard something that stopped me cold. Jake was laughing. Not the delirious laughter of someone going into shock. Not the nervous giggle of someone trying to cope with trauma. Just a genuine, amused chuckle as he examined the gash on his forearm. Well, that is going to leave a mark, he said casually, pulling what appeared to be a small cloth from his pocket. He wrapped it around the wound with the kind of practiced efficiency that suggested he had done this many times before. Martinez, I shouted from the observation deck. Do not move. Medical is on the way. He looked up at me with genuine confusion. Medical? For this? It is just a scratch, Commander. I have had paper cuts worse than this. Dr. Valana arrived with her full emergency medical team, complete with trauma stabilizers, emergency surgery equipment, and enough medical supplies to treat a small war. She took one look at Jake's injury and began barking orders. Get me 50 cc's of coagulant stabilizer, rep the surgical bay. This cadet is losing massive amounts of blood and needs immediate intervention. Jake held up his hand politely. Excuse me, Doc, but I think there might be some confusion. This is not really a big deal. Dr. Valana's tentacles froze mid-gesture. Not a big deal. You have a laceration that extends through multiple tissue layers. The blood loss alone should have you in shock. Blood loss? Jake looked down at his bandaged arm, then back at the medical team. This is maybe 2 tablespoons of blood. I donate more than this every 8 weeks back home. The entire medical team stared at him. You willingly give away your blood? Dr. Valana's voice had dropped to a whisper. Sure, it is a good way to help people, plus they give you cookies afterwards. Jake paused, then brightened. Oh, and the Red Cross always needs more typo negative. Universal donor, you know. Dr. Valana's scanner was beeping frantically as she ran it over Jake's injury. This is impossible. The wound is already beginning to close. Your cellular regeneration rate is 60 times faster than the galactic average. Really? Jake looked genuinely interested. That explains why I heal so fast. I broke my leg in 3 places playing soccer when I was 12 and I was back on the field in 6 weeks. Doctor said it was the fastest healing he had ever seen. You broke your leg in 3 places? Dr. Valana's voice was getting higher with each word. Oh yeah, compound fracture too. Bone was sticking right out through the skin. Pretty gross, actually. Jake seemed to be enjoying the memory. Then there was the time I dislocated my shoulder playing baseball. And the concussion from football. Oh, and the appendectomy when I was 15. That one was emergency surgery. They had to cut me open right there on the operating table. Dr. Valana swayed slightly. Emergency surgery? Yep. No anesthesia either, since there was not time. I was awake for the whole thing. Fascinating stuff, really. You can actually see your own organs when they open you up like that. That was when Dr. Valana fainted. As the medical team rushed to revive their chief physician, Jake looked around with the kind of innocent confusion that was becoming his trademark. Did I say something wrong? He asked, genuinely concerned. I mean, everyone has surgery stories, right? Right? The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Dr. Valana hitting the ground. By week 4, I thought nothing else could surprise me about humans. I was, once again, completely wrong. The psychological evaluation chamber was our most sophisticated piece of equipment, designed by the finest minds in the galaxy to test the absolute limits of mental endurance. The scenarios it generated were so intense, so psychologically devastating, that most species required months of therapy just to recover from a single session. Chief psychologist Dr. Nexarian had spent decades perfecting the system. It could simulate everything from complete sensory isolation to life-threatening combat scenarios, from social humiliation to existential terror. The goal was not to break cadets, but to identify their psychological breaking points so we could provide appropriate mental conditioning. The average cadet lasts approximately 14 minutes before requesting termination, Dr. Nexarian explained as we watched Jake enter the chamber. The record holder, a Krillian warrior philosopher, lasted 23 minutes before suffering a complete nervous breakdown. Through the observation window, we watched as Jake settled into the neural interface chair with the same casual attitude he brought to everything else. The technicians attached the monitoring electrodes, their hands shaking slightly as they worked around this human who had already redefined our understanding of biological limitations. Initiating Scenario 1, announced the computer. Complete sensory isolation. Subject will experience total darkness, silence, and tactile deprivation for extended period. The chamber went black. Most species began showing signs of distress within the first 60 seconds of complete sensory deprivation. The psychological pressure of absolute nothingness was considered one of the most effective torture methods in the galaxy. Jake's biometric readings remained steady. In fact, they suggested he was relaxing. After 5 minutes, we heard his voice over the intercom. "Hey, this is pretty nice, actually. Kind of reminds me of meditation class. My ex-girlfriend dragged me to one of those silent retreat weekends once. 48 hours of no talking, no technology, just sitting quietly with your thoughts." Dr. Nexarian's 4 eyes widened. "Your species voluntarily subjects itself to sensory deprivation for recreation?" "Oh sure," Jake's voice came through clearly, completely unstressed. "Some people pay good money for flotation tanks. You float in salt water in complete darkness and silence for hours. Very relaxing." Initiating Scenario 2, the computer announced, clearly confused by the lack of psychological distress. High-pressure combat simulation with multiple hostile entities. The chamber filled with holographic enemies, explosions, and the sounds of warfare. The scenario was designed to trigger every possible fear response simultaneously, overwhelming the subject with life-threatening situations from all directions. We heard Jake make a small, interested sound, then what could only be described as delighted laughter. "Oh, wow. This is just like Call of Duty, but with way better graphics." His voice was filled with genuine enthusiasm. "Are these AI enemies or pre-programmed? Because their movement patterns are really sophisticated." The monitoring equipment began flashing warning lights. Not because Jake was in distress, but because his adrenaline levels were spiking in patterns consistent with extreme enjoyment. "Subject appears to be experiencing pleasure during combat simulation," reported the technician, his voice cracking with disbelief. Initiating Scenario 3, the computer said, sounding almost desperate now. "Existential horror protocol. Subject will be exposed to cosmic insignificance, mortality awareness, and universal meaninglessness." This was the big one. The scenario that had broken seasoned military veterans. Images of infinite space, the heat death of the universe, and the ultimate futility of all existence flooded the chamber. Jake was quiet for about 30 seconds. Then we heard him again. "You know, this reminds me of a movie I saw last weekend. Cosmic horror stuff. Really good cinematography, though I think the tentacle monster could have used better CGI." Dr. Nexarian was frantically checking his equipment. "This is impossible. These are images that drive most species to catatonic states. They represent the fundamental terrors that haunt all sentient life." "Oh, you mean like Lovecraft stuff?" Jake's voice was conversational, like he was discussing the weather. "Yeah, humans love that genre. Cosmic horror, existential dread, the insignificance of humanity in the face of an uncaring universe. Great storytelling. Have you read At the Mountains of Madness? Classic. Your species creates entertainment based on existential terror?" Dr. Nexarian's voice had risen to nearly a shriek. "Absolutely. Horror movies, scary books, haunted houses, escape rooms where people chase you with chainsaws. We pay money to be terrified." Jake paused thoughtfully. "Actually, some people are really into extreme sports too. Skydiving, bungee jumping, free climbing, base jumping. The more dangerous, the better." "You seek out danger for pleasure?" "Oh yeah. Adrenaline junkies, we call them. The rush you get from life-threatening situations is addictive. Some people need bigger and bigger thrills to get the same high." Jake's voice took on the tone of someone sharing interesting trivia. Rock climbing without safety equipment, wingsuit flying, swimming with sharks, volcano surfing. You name it, someone has probably figured out how to make it more dangerous and then done it for fun. The psychological evaluation chamber, our most sophisticated torture device, it had been reduced to providing entertainment for a human who thought mortal terror was a recreational activity. Dr. Nexarian sat down heavily in his chair. "Computer, terminate all scenarios. I need to completely rebuild our understanding of psychological warfare." As Jake emerged from the chamber, stretching like he had just woken up from a pleasant nap, He looked around at our stunned faces with that familiar expression of innocent confusion. That was fun. Do you guys have any multiplayer options? I bet this would be great for team-building exercises. I realized then that we had not just underestimated humans. We had fundamentally misunderstood what it meant to survive on a Deathworld. It was not just about being tough enough to live there. It was about being so adapted to constant danger that you forgot danger was supposed to be scary. The cafeteria incident happened 3 days later, and it nearly caused a diplomatic crisis. The Galactic Academy cafeteria was a marvel of nutritional science, with specialized food preparation stations for each species. The Valorians had their delicate kelp-based nutrients, carefully pH-balanced and served at precisely the right temperature. The Nethakari required complex mineral supplements that had to be prepared in sterile environments. The Krillians consumed liquefied proteins that would be toxic to most other species. Each meal was carefully planned, rigorously tested, and served with detailed warnings about cross-species contamination. The signs were everywhere. Do not consume food designated for other species. Doing so may result in severe illness or death. Jake, naturally, was standing in the middle of the cafeteria with a tray loaded with food from every single species station. Martinez. I called out, rushing over before he could take a bite. "What are you doing?" He looked down at his tray with genuine confusion. "Eating lunch?" I figured I would try a little bit of everything. You know, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. You cannot eat that. Chief nutritionist Dr. Kelvani materialized beside us, her scanner already beeping frantically as she analyzed the contents of Jake's tray. That combination of foods is lethal to most known species. The Krillian protein alone would dissolve your digestive system. Jake had already taken a bite of what looked like purple gelatin. He chewed thoughtfully, then nodded with approval. This is pretty good. Kind of like Jell-O, but with more of a kick to it. Dr. Kelvani's scanner was shrieking now. That is concentrated Krillian battle nutrition. It is designed to be consumed by beings with triple stomach chambers and acid-resistant intestinal linings. Jake said, taking another bite. Well, it is a little spicy, but nothing compared to the ghost pepper wings I had back home. Ghost pepper wings? Dr. Kelvani's voice had that familiar tone of dawning horror that we were all getting used to. Oh yeah, Carolina Reapers are even better. Those are about 2.2 million Scoville units. Great for clearing out the sinuses. Jake moved on to what appeared to be crystallized Valorian nutrients, popping them into his mouth like candy. My buddy Marcus and I used to have contests to see who could eat the hottest peppers. Good times. You consume poison plants for entertainment? Dr. Kelvani was frantically taking notes on her datapad. Poison plants? Jake looked genuinely confused. Oh, you mean capsaicin? Yeah, that is just a neurotoxin. Humans developed a tolerance for it thousands of years ago. We actually cultivate plants specifically to make them more toxic, then eat them for fun. The entire cafeteria had gone silent. Every alien in the room was staring at Jake as he systematically worked his way through foods that should have killed him 3 times over. Your species deliberately breeds plants to be more poisonous, then consumes them recreationally? Dr. Kelvani was writing so fast her stylus was smoking. Absolutely. Habaneros, jalapenos, serranos, but jolokia. The hotter, the better. Jake tried what looked like fermented Nethakari minerals and made a face. This tastes like it has gone bad. Is it supposed to be fizzy? That is perfectly fresh Nethakari nutrient paste. Dr. Kelvani protested. The fermentation process is essential for proper digestion. Oh, fermented food. We love that stuff too. Cheese, yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, wine, beer. Jake brightened considerably. Speaking of which, do you guys have any alcohol here? I could really go for a beer right now. The datapad fell from Dr. Kelvani's nerveless fingers. Alcohol? You mean ethanol? The industrial solvent? Well, I mean, technically yes, but we drink it for fun. Beer, wine, whiskey, vodka, tequila. Sometimes we even set it on fire before drinking it. Jake looked around at the horrified faces surrounding him. What? It is just a depressant. Helps you relax after a long day. You willingly consume industrial solvents for recreational purposes? Dr. Kelvani's voice was barely audible. Oh, sure. In fact, I have got a whole collection of hot sauces in my dorm room if anyone wants to try them. I brought my favorites from home. There is this one called Da Bomb that is about 119,000 Scoville units. It is great on pizza. The cafeteria erupted in chaos as half the alien species present began evacuating and the other half started calling for medical assistance. Jake, oblivious to the panic he had caused, was still eating his multi-species meal with obvious enjoyment. This is really good, he said to no one in particular. You guys should try mixing the food together more often. Everything tastes better when you combine it. The emergency simulation came without warning during week 6, and it was designed to be the ultimate test of cadet readiness. At 0300 hours, the Academy's main computer initiated Protocol Omega, complete system failure aboard a deep space vessel with all cadets trapped inside. The lights went out. Life support shut down. Gravity generators failed. Emergency klaxons screamed through the corridors as the temperature began dropping rapidly toward lethal levels. This was not a drill. This was the kind of scenario that killed experienced crews, and we had just subjected a group of first-year cadets to it. In the observation bunker, I watched the feeds from 47 different cameras as chaos erupted throughout the simulated ship. The carefully controlled environment that had been the Academy was now a death trap spinning through space with failing systems and no way out. The Valorians immediately went into hibernation mode, their biological response to extreme stress. The Nethakari began their traditional panic rituals, which involved a lot of screaming and running in circles. The Krillians tried to use their tentacles to manipulate the emergency controls, but their appendages were already beginning to freeze in the dropping temperatures. Within 10 minutes, most of the cadets were incapacitated. Those who were not unconscious were huddled together, waiting for rescue that was not coming. That is when we heard Jake's voice over the emergency communication system. Okay, everybody stay calm. I know this looks bad, but it is really not that different from the time my ship got caught in that ice storm off the coast of Alaska. His voice was steady, controlled, completely without panic. While 46 other cadets were either unconscious or paralyzed with fear, Jake sounded like he was discussing weekend plans. First things first, we need to get the life support back online. Thyla, I need you to stop screaming and help me find the emergency power coupling. Vex, can you move? Good. I need you to check the atmospheric recycling system. Through the camera feeds, I watched as Jake moved through the failing ship with casual efficiency. The temperature had dropped to nearly 30 below zero. Most of the lights were out. The artificial gravity was fluctuating wildly. He and Jake was treating it like a routine maintenance problem. Found the power coupling. He called out cheerfully. Looks like it is just a loose connection. Give me 2 seconds here. I watched in amazement as he jury-rigged a repair using nothing but standard equipment and what appeared to be chewing gum. The life support systems flickered back to life. There we go. Now, about that gravity problem. Thyla, I need you to crawl through that maintenance shaft and manually reset the gravity generator. I know it is dark and scary, but trust me, you can do this. I cannot. Thyla's voice was shaking with terror. It is too dark, too small. I will die in there. Hey, Jake's voice took on a surprisingly gentle tone. You know what I used to do when I was scared? I would think about something happy. What makes you happy, Thyla? The singing crystals of my homeworld, she whispered. Perfect. Think about those crystals while you crawl through the shaft. Pretend you are swimming through music. You got this. Over the next hour, Jake systematically organized the surviving cadets into repair teams, delegated tasks based on each species' capabilities, and somehow managed to restore full functionality to a ship that should have been a floating tomb. He did it all while cracking jokes, telling stories, and maintaining the kind of calm leadership that you would expect from a veteran commander, not a first-year cadet. When the simulation finally ended and the lights came back on, Jake was sitting cross-legged on the floor, sharing his emergency rations with the other cadets and explaining the basic principles of electrical repair. The trick is not to overthink it, he was saying. Most problems have simple solutions if you just stay calm and work through them logically. As I watched the debriefing footage later, one thing became crystal clear. This had not been a fluke. This had not been luck. This was what humans were designed for. They were not just survivors. They were the people you wanted around when everything went wrong. They were the species that looked at impossible situations and said, "Well, this reminds me of Tuesday." Earth was not classified as a death world because it was dangerous. It was classified as a death world because it produced beings who thought danger was normal. 6 weeks ago, when Jake Martinez first stumbled into our orientation hall dripping wet from a rainstorm, we had laughed at the idea that his homeworld could be considered dangerous. We had looked at this unassuming human and seen nothing more than a representative of some backwater planet that had somehow convinced the bureaucrats to give them a Class 12 rating. Now, as I watched Jake explain to a group of Valorian engineering cadets how to hotwire a plasma conduit using nothing but spare parts and determination, I finally understood what we had been dealing with all along. Humans were not just tough. They were not just adaptable. They were the living embodiment of what it meant to thrive in an environment that actively tried to kill you every single day. They had evolved beyond survival. They had reached the point where they sought out danger for entertainment and considered mortal peril to be a minor inconvenience. The classification system had not made an error. If anything, Class 12 was probably too low. Every species in the galaxy had a breaking point. Every species had limits. Every species had conditions under which they simply could not function. Humans apparently did not. "Hey, Commander," Jake called out, noticing me watching him. "I have been meaning to ask you something." "What is it, Martinez?" He scratched his head with that familiar gesture of innocent confusion. "Well, I have been looking at the homeworld classifications for some of the other species here, and I was wondering, what exactly makes a planet easy to live on? Because from what I can tell, most of these worlds sound pretty boring." I stared at him for a long moment, then began to laugh. It started as a quiet chuckle, then built into the kind of deep, uncontrollable laughter that comes from finally understanding a joke that has been building for weeks. Jake looked concerned. "Are you okay, sir?" "Martinez," I said, wiping tears from my eyes, "on behalf of the entire Galactic Military Academy, I would like to formally apologize." "For what?" "What?" "For ever thinking that Earth was anything other than the most terrifying planet in the known universe." Jake brightened. "Oh, cool. So you guys want to visit sometime? I know some great hiking trails. Fair warning, though, it is bear season, so we might want to bring some pepper spray." I made a mental note to increase Earth's threat classification to Class 15. Maybe Class 20, just to be safe.